Thanks a lot for inviting me to talk about team effectiveness, autonomy, and radical collaboration. My name is Andrea Altier, and today I work as a self employed leadership coach and course instructor. Earlier in my career, predictability and safety was super important for me. And when I look back today, I realize that I've let myself become limited by fear. When I started as a developer many years back, I was completely new to the work life and I was afraid of many things. I was afraid of being seen as incompetent. I was afraid I would not be good enough. I was afraid of not being included. I was afraid of not being liked. And I was afraid of rejection. I felt that there were so many things that were out of reach for me, and I felt that I let opportunities pass. I'm happy that I reached a point in my life where I decided I would no longer be led by fear or let fear decide for me. So when I started as a professional coach, I experienced a lot of coaching myself and I worked my way through my own fears. And eventually, last year, I decided to leave my safety net. I had a predictable job as an employee, and I decided to start my own business. And I must say, this was a huge step for me. And now I'm here today in front of you. And for sure, I'm not like 100% best friends with fear. I still have fears because part of me has this fear, especially when I'm in front of people. But I've taken steps that a few years ago I thought I would never ever take. A few years back, I started working as a leadership coach, and what I realized was that it wasn't just me. There are so many people limiting themselves because of fears and limiting beliefs. And there is so much hidden potential in each and every single one of us. And I really feel that this is where I want to make a difference. Amy Edmondson writes in her book, The Fearless Organization, that today's leaders must be willing to take on the job of driving fear out of the organization to create the conditions for learning, innovation, and growth. Fear is a self-protection mechanism. It's activated when there's something that we don't want to feel. It's a physical response. It happens automatically, autonomously, unconsciously. You can say that fear has its own life. And I would like to check in with you. Have you ever, in like any point in your career, felt fear? And did you experience any similar feelings the last week or the last month? If you check in with yourself, I'm quite sure that you would also agree that this is a quite normal feeling. That some of us, like at one point or another, we would feel that, even when we are at work. When I'm about to speak in front of an audience, I often notice that my heart starts beating, my palms might get sweaty, and I know that this is my amygdala that is reacting. This part of me and you and the part of us that has the ability to respond and be activated even if we are not experiencing real threats. It's enough that we feel some kind of pressure or that we feel stress, and then this reaction comes automatically. If I, for example, forget what I want to say, it's because my fear response would be active and my amygdala stops part of my thinking brain and leaves that part inaccessible to me. And the consequence is that I get this tunnel vision. What typically happens is one of three responses. It's a fight, flight, or a freeze mode. This is completely normal. It's a human response, and it's there to protect me from feeling uncomfortable feelings or pain. The amygdala helps us deal with conflicted situations by automatically getting us into a fight mode where we get ready for an attack or fight, the flight mode where we might want to run away, or the freeze mode where we nowadays mostly zoom out. At the office, a flight mode could be visible in a meeting when we physically or mentally leave the room. For example, someone says something that triggers me, and I pick up my phone and I start checking my phone, or I mentally just fade and start thinking about my weekend and what I'm going to do in the weekend. This often happens unconsciously, and we might not even notice that it happens, but people around us will notice because they experience us as bad listeners. So when we are triggered in this way, our defense system is active and it's visible to others as our defense mechanisms. And there are many things that might trigger defense mechanisms in us, and what triggers my defense mechanisms might not be the same as what triggers yours. Earlier, I mentioned that when I started as a developer, I felt fears in many different ways. When I was a child, I was a lot in the hospital. I had a skin disease. And when I was around 7 or 8 years old, I had a big outburst of eczema in my face. And on our way to the hospital, my mother wanted to go by the school to inform my teacher. And I remember I really wished that there would not be a recess or break at school. So I really, really wanted that no one could see me. And when we arrived at the school and parked in front of the school, of course, there was a break. Everyone was out. And I tried to hide in the backseat of the car while my mother went inside to get my teacher. And when they came back to the car, my teacher put her head inside the car through the front door of the car to greet me. And the moment she saw me, I noticed that her face kind of twitched a little bit, and she made this grimace in her face. It happened automatically. It was autonomous. And I really felt I just wanted earth to open underneath me. All I wanted was for the earth to just grab me and pull me into this hole and allow me to disappear. I loved my teacher, and I know that she loved me. But this burned into my memory and to my body. And the consequence for me was that I didn't want to be seen. It took many years in my work life until I felt it was okay to be seen. For example, giving presentations in front of an audience was something I simply did not want to do. My colleagues, of course, didn't know the reason, and potentially they would make up their own stories about why. The point here is that we don't know what story the people around us carry. We don't know what others have experienced in life. So what we need to understand is that reactions that we have today might not be related to the current situation at all. And I'm suggesting that this is something we need to become aware of. It's not like we are supposed to stop having our reactions, but we need to understand that it happens. That what is happening in the moment and our reactions in the moment might not be related to that situation at all. That is natural. It is human. But it's not always effective in giving us the results that we want. In reality, I have only one fear, and that is the fear of not being able to cope. In the book The Fearless Organizations by Amy Edmondson, she describes fear as the one thing that holds organizations most back today. And I believe that if we want to create autonomous teams and drive fear out of organizations, it's important that we understand the underlying mechanisms that are there and what will help us to optimize for speed, flow, and collaboration on an interpersonal level. In the theory that radical collaboration is based on, the human element, we learn that the team goes through the phases of inclusion, control, and openness. Inclusion in the context of a team is about whether I'm in or out. Am I part of this team or not? Will I find my place? It's about group dynamics, the breadth of relationships. So how many people do I interact with? Control is about whether I feel I'm above or below. How much influence do I have? Where in the hierarchy of influence do I find myself? If I, for example, have an expertise in a specific area or a specialist skill, I might have more to say on certain topics than others. So control is about who is above and who is below on the scale of influence. Openness is about the depth of relationship. So how well do we know each other? Can I be open with you about what's happening inside of me? And do I dare to be honest, ask questions, challenge, or disagree? Dr. Will Schutz, the American psychologist who developed the human element, did so after researching for over 30 years on how people work together in teams. And he concluded that our behavior is influenced, among other things, by fears that we have in relation to others and fears that we have on a personal level. So we'll take a look at how this might play out in a team. A classic but fictional example of a team that wants autonomy but doesn't quite get it. The team is a platform team. It's central to the organization. They have many stakeholders who are waiting for large and important deliveries. And they work on many different projects at the same time. They have constantly new activities being started, but it's not that much that get finished. The team is under strong pressure from management. It's expected after now they have scaled up that the team would start delivering. what and how is clear. So they have chosen agile ways of working, Scrum as their method and framework, and they have divided the most important projects between 2 teams. So they are good to go and ready set up. One day, the team tech lead shares that there is like this bad atmosphere in the team, and he feels excluded. He doesn't feel heard. He's an external consultant and he believes that he should be included in important decisions, even if he is external. And he's been given the responsibility to follow up on the team and the deliveries, but he feels that he's been ignored. He's considering doing something else, like finding another assignment, but he feels guilty. He feels that he needs to stay. The team is dependent on his expertise. He's just so kind of fed up with the product owner who blames the team and him for not delivering. They disagree about priorities, and he feels that he's not included in important decisions. So his opinion is really that he's being ignored. He doesn't feel valued. He doesn't feel significant. He feels that his commitment is really decreasing because he feels that the work is becoming more and more meaningless. On a personal level, he feels worthless because he doesn't matter. He feels like he doesn't make a difference. And now all he wants to do is go on a long vacation. One of the things that have created a bad atmosphere is that one of the product owners is perceived as being very controlling. He wants to be involved in everything. He wants to manage every detail. It's important for him to have the final say and be the one making the decisions. And what the team and the tech lead doesn't know is that the product owner is having a very difficult time. At home, he has recently gone through a breakup, and he's going through a very difficult time in his life. At the same time, he believes it's important to separate private life and work life, so he hasn't been open about this with his team. Part of the reason that he feels that he doesn't want to open up is because he doesn't felt like being a choice in his situation personally, in his private life. It wasn't his choice, this breakup. So on a personal level, he really feels helpless. At work, he has just been given more responsibility, and this helps him to stay kind of up. He feels he has this need to feel competent and to show that he's competent. He definitely wants to avoid being humiliated, so his response behavior is that he takes full control of the situation. The tech lead has tried repeatedly to approach his senior manager, but he doesn't get any support there because the senior manager doesn't see the problem. He thinks this is something that will pass on its own. It's really not a problem. The senior manager is a person that wants to be liked. He's seen as a people pleaser. In reality, he is afraid of rejection. And therefore, he's made it a habit to avoid any kind of difficult conversations that could result in him potentially being disliked or being rejected. So on a personal level, he feels afraid, and he fears being unlovable. The example shows that we have different kinds of defenses. So when we feel any kind of fear in relation to others or on a personal level, we get defensive. And the fact that we have a fear, it's not a problem in itself. What creates the problem is when we become rigid or stuck in our behavior. So when we want to be When we are unable to be flexible, that's when we get into trouble. So imagine a meeting where the team comes together to discuss, why is there such a bad atmosphere in this team? So the critic would say, there is a bad atmosphere here because you don't deliver on time. There is too little control over the deliveries. The masochist replies, yes, it's my fault. I couldn't get hold of the developer because he was sick. I should have talked to him before he got sick. It's my fault. The denier then continues and says, what are you talking about? There is no problem. I actually don't think we have a bad atmosphere at all. I think we should look ahead. The demander replies, yes, let's look ahead. I just made a list of what I think we should do to get a better atmosphere in the team. Each and every one of you have now been given your own task. I will call for another meeting next Friday to follow up that everyone has done their part. The victim says, it's always like you're always blaming me. I need help. I don't have capacity to additional task. There's no one that helps me, and this always happens to me. The helper then responds, do you need help? I can help. What should I do? I can do it for you. Have you ever been in a meeting like this? We could perhaps imagine that going into a meeting to talk about the atmosphere, we already have some triggers activated. At least some of us might be triggered. So we are kind of activated already in our defense mechanisms. And when we are activated, we become poor listeners. And in addition, we could become stuck in our position. So we can become very rigid. So not flexible at all. The question then becomes, what do we do about it? In Radical Collaboration and the Human Element, we propose that openness is the great simplifier to effective collaborative culture. The radical thing here is to face the fear with more openness and more honesty about what's happening in me in this moment. This is radical because we often choose to hold back. But openness can help the team to start operating without having the handbrake down. If we want to create autonomy and effective collaborative cultures, openness is an essential tool for creating trust and a psychologically safe culture. On the one hand, we have fear, and on the other hand, we have openness. They are like two opposites. Openness helps us avoid misunderstandings and assumptions, while at the same time, it requires more responsibility from the individual to both understand themselves and what they want. In dialogue, we often tend to stay on the surface and talk about facts and thoughts. But if we try to include more of ourselves, so what's happening in me, in addition to facts and thought, we include in the dialogue an element of emotions, feelings, and express openly what we want. This is practicing more openness. So if we go back to our example, why and the meeting, why is there such a bad atmosphere in this team? The fact could be that the team has not delivered on time. the tech lead feels ignored because he tried to speak up. And what he wants is to finish before Easter holiday because he wants to go on a holiday. The product owner feels incompetent because he's not in control. And he wants to work all the time because it's the first Easter after his breakup. Senior manager feels afraid of being rejected by the management team. What he wants is really to reach the goal, be taken seriously, and get a bonus for the team. In the meeting about the bad atmosphere, if they would have shared their first truth first, it could potentially create a completely different dialogue. So sharing their, in addition to the facts and thoughts, sharing their feelings and their wants. Openness creates understanding, and you avoid kind of different versions of reality created by the stories in our minds because we are guessing. So when we have lack of transparency, that creates insecurity, which again creates lack of trust. We will not get autonomy and effective team culture if we can't feel confident in the other team members in the team. And that's why transparency and openness is important. I observe in the tech environment or the tech community that we usually like to keep the dialogue on the outer side. So what do we produce and how do we produce it? So we talk about products and services, we talk about the methods that we use, and then these topics are, even if it's complex, it's easy to talk about. We talk about the system and we want to fix the system if there's something not working, if there's not enough flow or speed of delivery. And I think that we get better knowledge and a bigger toolbox if we also start to learn about the inner side of organizations and also talk about the inner side of the organization, and we work on those aspects as well. And with the inner side, I mean including emotions, so what happens inside of me and what happens between us in our interpersonal relationship. I believe, as part of radical collaboration and the human element, that this is where we have the most potential in organizations today. So an invitation to you is that you try out the conversation cube, include more of you in your conversations, and the next time you feel fear is taking over, try to face it with openness and see what happens in your relationships. Don't let fear rule, don't let fear limit you. Thank you.